in particular Dr. Baines for his willingness to jump on the opportunity with a impromptu and food for thought that we don't typically have scheduled in our yearly plans. So thank you very much for hosting this. I'd like to introduce Dr. Barbara Pazey from the University of Texas at Austin. Barbara's here on a Big 12 faculty fellowship from Austin and has been here for the last 2 weeks working on a number of things, but particularly a project that she and I have been actively engaged in for a number of years now. And so I won't go into much detail about that because that's not part of her presentation this morning for the Food for Thought. She is, well, she can explain how she's situated at the University of Texas at Austin, but as you can see from the front slide, she's pretty active in two distinct units there. So it's been a pleasure to work with her, particularly in the realm of fully and deeply appreciating what we might see as a transdisciplinary endeavor. And so I'll let Barbara introduce herself and her background, but thank you very much for attending Food for Thought this morning. If this goes well, we might have more breakfasts instead of lunch. Who knows? Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jean. And thank you, Dr. for allowing me to be here. I feel at home. I've got special educators and educational administrator people and other people that cross across the college and the university, so I'm very excited to be here. My PhD is from the University of Texas. When I went there back in the early 90s and mid 90s, I went on a special education administration fellowship that was a personnel preparation grant, and it was a great opportunity for me to be able to go through the university. And at the time, I got my PhD in educational administration, but you could either go through special ed or educational administration. And Dr. Martin, you know what I'm talking about as far as the personnel leadership prep grant. So it was a great time. The ed admin department was strong. The special ed department was somewhat strong, but it was going through some restructuring. So, but just so you kind of know, I have a bachelor's and master's in music, so there's that piece of my life that I'm hoping to move back into, especially when you hear me talking about STEM and STEAM and all of those things, because I know that the arts as a special ed teacher have a huge part to play. I've been a K-12 music teacher. I've coached girls sports, and so when I moved to South Carolina from Ohio, I had an opportunity to become a special education teacher, and I just fell in love with it. And so I use a lot of my area of interest is because of that, and being so student focused. I've always tried to ask students what is important to them. And I'll never forget when I left South Carolina, my students that I had in high school told me, Miss Pazey, don't forget to tell our story. And that just kept on going over and over and over again. And so when I had a chance to do my dissertation, all my friends were doing quick and dirty quantitative dissertations, and I decided that I wanted to see what students had to say about what they wanted to learn, etc. So I did kind of an ethnographic qualitative research study and hung out with the students and wore a t-shirt and blue jeans. How much more could you love that? And so I'm setting the context because this was in '95. And so I did my dissertation in '95 and actually used Louis Smol's theory of funds of knowledge to find out how students learn in the classroom. And so the interview protocol that I used for my dissertation study is the interview protocol that I have consistently used since then. So when I moved back to Austin, I moved back to and actually found out that the school that I did my dissertation study at was the first high school to be reconstituted in the state of Texas, which means that after 5 years, they were in threat of closure by the state. So this was a very interesting opportunity that I had to go back in 2010 after their first year, after they reopened, and use and interview the same profile of students. I interviewed 6 students, all 2 students that were in 9th grade, 2 students in sophomore year, and 1 student junior and 1 senior. And then I also, if you know students and their peers, all of a sudden everybody else wants to be interviewed because, you know, their friends are getting all this attention and you're taking pictures. So I wanted to lay that groundwork for you. And then the third opportunity, the third site is a award-winning STEM high school. So we're going to be talking about 2 different high school sites where I interviewed students with disabilities. At this other school, I interviewed 21 students, every student in the school that was on a 504 or IEP plan. So every student that you hear this information from is either going to be a student with a disability in secondary education, or is going to be a student that that is a peer or a friend. But nonetheless, both of these schools are a high minority population. So one is an urban school and one is a rural suburban school in South Central Texas. So, okay, so that's the context. And so I'm going to take you through sort of a situation of, you know, of course, we all know the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act in 1975. And what's interesting then is that when I got to UT, having been a special ed teacher, I never heard of a nation at risk. You know, we're in the classroom working with our students, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about a nation at risk. And right about that time when I got to UT, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed, and also the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so all things were kind of happening at the university and the college. But then what's interesting is that right about the time this all came out, the SCANS report, which is what work requires of schools, came out, and it was kind of a totally different. Here we are worrying about Ross Perot and everybody else, and you know what we're going to do for reform. But then we've got these business individuals in the Department of Labor that's saying, what do we want from our students? And so we've got this juxtaposition going on, and also, of course, America 2000, Goals 2000. So we've got this juxtaposition about what we want students to be able to know and be able to do versus helping students to improve academically. So then framework for 21st century skills, partnership for 21st century skills, and then, of course, most recently, the Every Student Achieves Act. So it's interesting because of all of this, I've just really been interested in how this impacts the students. So we know basically from actually the literature and the actual bill itself, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act talks about the 4 goals of IDEA. And so I want you to kind of, you know, reflect a little bit and think about equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, economic self-sufficiency. So, you know, does that say anything about students being able to pass a high stakes test to be able to graduate? Not necessarily. So moving on. Now I'm going to fast forward. So I'm going to kind of be juxtaposing back and forth because remember, we're talking about students at different periods of time. 1995. Also, this particular school in 1995 was a magnet school. So even though they were a neighborhood school in a very poor community, the school in 1995 had a liberal arts magnet school. So what was interesting is not only were the students with disabilities in resource classes and in trailers and in certain wings of the building, but on top of that, they had a magnet school that was separate from all the rest of the students in the entire building. However, they did have a few classes together, like their band, music, they all played football, things like that together. So they did have a chance to integrate. So anyway, some of the things, and I went through the 21st century the Every Child Achieves Act and one of the things that really stands out is Title IV of this act talks about 21st century schools. And so these are some of the things that I actually lifted, and also other people have done an analysis. So we're looking for well-rounded education for all students, and they always say all students. Conditions for learning with a healthy, safe environment, personalized learning experiences, and I'm still trying to understand whether or not they really know what a personalized learning experience is. This just sounds good. college and career guidance and counseling programs. And then I got really excited because they talked about the music and arts being used as a tool to be able to get students to think critically, programs and activities to improve STEM, and accelerated learning programs. Now, so then of course the skills that are actually listed from an earlier study, the Human Resources Development Group talks about essential skills for success. And Rotherham and Willingham talk about, well, we need to make sure that we don't just have this curriculum or this content for just a few individuals, but that we make it available to all. So all this rhetoric is going on, but Ludlow in 2011 said, you know, we're talking about 21st century skills, but there really is not much attention being paid to students with disabilities. I mean, it's maybe in the documents, it may be in Blueprint for Reform or, you know, Race to the Top language, but it's not really being discussed or focused on. So here we have some data that we know that there's a large number of students that go to college or go on to post-secondary education with disabilities. And of course, that's not accurate because although there's a lot of students that don't self-report when they go to school, they no longer have their teacher there or their parents there to help them. And then also, that just came out on the U.S. Department of Labor that in 2014, we had the number of students that only 50% employed versus those that are students without disabilities. So now, go back. This is the quote I started my dissertation with. So this was back in 1995. And so I put this back here because it's that don't forget to tell our story situation. And so, and I've always kind of lived by this quotation that we need to stop listening to a lot of the adults and start listening to what students have to say. And so student voice and disability studies are kind of the perspectives that are driving this analysis. And a lot has been done in student voice. Actually, the TCR yearbook for 2015 actually has an entire book actually dedicated to student voice and educational reform. But Dana Mitra said that we actually need to provide a space for individuals that if we're going to develop schools, we need to listen to the students themselves and how it's going to affect them. And so, however, this is a great book right here. Those of you that are special ed, Keith Moore and Duff, and I told that person I was going to be over there. Keith Moore and Duff. And because they actually interviewed students with disabilities, and some of those students actually have commentaries. But we're not talking about just student government, and that's one of the things that I learned. Some of my best peer mediators and peer mediation in the high school were the students who got suspended and the students that had special needs. They were the ones because they could empathize and be very compassionate. So there's different things that we're actually doing by including the excluded. And so that's one piece is student voice. And then the other piece that lens that I look at, and I don't consider myself a radical disability studies person. I do think that we have to look through the lens of the tradition of special education, but I also think that we have to understand that there are ways that sometimes we construct a disability by the way we structure our schools, by the way we expect students to behave. And so that's kind of the attitude of disability studies, is that we're saying, let's look at the environment and take an ecological type of view of what we're actually providing our students and see if we can find a way to make those corrections. So but one of the things that they actually do is they focus on an inclusive dialogue and bringing students into the conversation. So now I'm going to move on, just to kind of give you and so my interview protocol actually had 12 questions, but the questions that really got the most information from the students, and I did focus group interviews and individual interviews, was tell me what you like about school, tell me what you don't like about school. Pretty simple, right? What do you like about your classes? What What do you not like? And then this was the one that really, if you could learn anything you wanted to learn in school, what would it be?
That's a good question to ask.
Mhm. And let me tell you, and of course, this was based on the funds of knowledge, which was that, you know, we're trying, like, what is relevant to the students and how does this relate to your lives? And this isn't in this, but one of the questions that I asked was, well, how does what you're learning in school, especially in 1995, but 2010, how does what you're learning in school relate to your real life and what you do outside of school? Not much, you know? So, all right. So I've kind of gone through a lot of this already, but used qualitative case studies, semi-structured interviews, you know, a lot of, tell me more. Can you give me an example? Those types of things. Individual and focus groups. Some of the students, a couple students wanted to be interviewed together. They were a little bit nervous about being interviewed by themselves, but in most cases I did individual interviews, but then I also had some of the students were in a leadership group, a student leadership group, wasn't student government, but they also then asked to be interviewed with their friends. So not only is a single site analysis, but it's a cross case analysis. So I'm bringing quotations into all of that. So as I said before, I think I explained there were 27 students total in 1995. And then in 1995, I also did classroom observations. And then what was really cool is the students said, why don't you just give us a tape recorder and we'll take it with us. So I have like these tape recordings of locker room conversations. And I got to, you know, playing dominoes and, you know, a lot of really cool things, you know, and so that's not in this, but I still plan on writing about that, you know, and also about when they were getting ready to go to prom, how they were standing outside one of the mobile units and they were talking about where they could buy where they could get the best deal for the tuxedo and all of this type of thing. And it was such rich, and I thought, gosh, if only the teachers could be hearing what they're talking about, you know, and what they're actually doing. Why don't they bring the really great, rich thinking that was going on into the classroom? But, okay. So these were some of the common themes, and it looks like I force-fed 21st century skills onto this, but you're gonna see when I show you some of the quotations that they're really, so these are themes. What's it look like, right? What they wanna learn, they can learn anything they wanted to learn. And I would be glad to pass this, this PowerPoint on to anybody if you want, because I know I'm moving quickly, so.
Barbara, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
About the previous slide? So just so I'm clear,
Yes.
So Heritage High School was while you were in dissertation work?
Well, it was, if you were to read any of the work that I've done, it was originally called Central High School. Okay, so I mean, I'm giving it a pseudonym. And then when it was reconstituted, they had to change the name of the school. And so this is, so.
But in the interim, you were high school administrator.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I should have said, it should be Central High School for 1995, and then for 2010 and 2012, it should be Heritage High School at the Central High School campus. So I apologize. So in both of these situations, though, in 1995 in 2010, I'm very sorry, I have a few errors. It should be 21 in 2012, and then I also went back in 2010, and then I went back in 2012. So I apologize, I don't have that quite accurate. So, but then the other school that I'm referring to is Friendly High School, and so Friendly High School is the award-winning STEM high school President Obama went to go visit it in 2013. Actually, I was collecting my data right in the midst of all of that, which was kind of fun. So, okay. So, classes and learning environments that they said that they felt they learned the best. And so these are again the themes. And I'm saying knowledge and skills they needed to survive. I put 21st century because back in 1995 we were talking about the 21st century. So now what I'm going to actually get to is in 1995. Now most of these students in 1995 were in resource classes. And so they were taking English resource, social studies resource classes. Occasionally, some of them had band or other types of classes. I think there one class they had that was general ed with science, and it was probably because a lot of the students that I worked with were athletes, and the football coach was the science classroom teacher, and he basically everything you would do as a coach he did in his classroom. He had team-based instruction, and so they did very, very well. And so the classes where they thrived, what do you think those classes were? Those were the classes that were hands-on, lab-oriented, and if you notice, these were classes where they had an opportunity to interact and work with their general education peers. And so, okay, so now these are the characteristics of the classes that the students actually said. This is in 95. Okay, so when I say technology and social networking, obviously they weren't texting each other, but they loved being able to do computer classes and so there was a computer class and they were able to talk to their friends and learn if they didn't understand something, because that was one of the things that I asked was, if you don't understand what you're learning, how do you go about learning it? And they're more likely, of course, to ask their peers than they are their teachers because of the fact that they don't want to look stupid in front of the rest of the class. But what really, I put a couple of things in. Challenging classes that bust my head and make me learn. Less book work and worksheets. I mean, I remember sitting there working on this worksheet. And, yes, do you believe how stuck in this worksheet? You know, like we'd be talking to each other, you know, and because I did all the worksheets, I did everything that they did. Knowing how to present yourself. You know, because this was a student that was LD-BD, and he actually took me into his self-contained classroom, and he said, Miss, you don't want to stay here too long because, you know, you're going to see a side of me that you don't want, that I don't want you to see. You know, so I did not hang out with him that much in that classroom, but he's the one that said, I'm going to learn how to present myself. So these are students, teacher who pushes us to do our best and don't slack. Teacher does not throw it all down at them at once and breaks it down. Let's see. Oh, and the how to negotiate and make or broker deals. That's that conversation they have at the trailer, you know. And so I actually talked, because after I listened to it, I said, wow, you guys were really talking about some interesting things, you know. Oh, this one student in his art class, he had and I wasn't there, but his friend took the tape recorder and he said, I'm going to talk to you about all the students in this class. It was hysterical, you know, like he's like, okay, this person's drawn like a mug and all these different things that he was talking about. But I just thought, this guy has great leadership skills. He just took the tape recorder and went around the room and had people introducing themselves on the tape recorder and stuff. It was just great. Okay, so that was 1995. So here we are going back. The school has gone through in 2002, ironically, in 2001 or 2002, the magnet school was taken away from the school. So right about that time, of course, what do you think is going to happen with the high stakes tests and all of that because they combined the sport? So 5 years later, the school closes. And actually, when they reopened, they did open under our new tech high school model. They were using 21st century skills. It was a STEM, one of them was a STEM, they were both STEM academies, and one was global and one was environmental. And then it was reconstituted again, just so you know, in 2011. So they moved it back to one campus, hired a new principal, and by the winter, by the end of the first semester, that principal retired. So between 2008 and 2012, they've had 5 different principals. So, but they did, so, you know, I have a whole article about, you know, the whole idea of what's going on and how they've been, you know, stability, just give us stability. But anyway, so, but what they did say when they said what they wanted to learn was a lot deeper, even though it was, so, teamwork, social interaction, doing listening, PBLs connected to a specific problem or topic, problem solving, what if scenarios, interdisciplinary approach. So I did not say, oh, you're PBL, can you tell me about this? This is what they said they wanted, they liked about school and what they wanted to learn. However, much of this was in the context of them saying what they didn't like about school because they were talking about all the focus on test prep and everything that they had. And so, I'm sorry. Because I said, well, what would you like to be learning then? Because they said, oh, you know, we were a project-based learning school. This was in 2012. We all had our own laptop computers. Now think about this. They rolled out the laptop computers. They didn't give the teachers any instruction. And so guess what was happening? Some of the students were hawking the computers for cash, right? What did they, you know, some of the students, you know, didn't see it as important. They were destroying the computers. So the next year they go back, guess what? No laptop computers. If you want one, you have to sign it out. So these students, they felt like, well, what do they want us to do? You know, plus the city was going to, the school district was trying to work out a negotiation so that they could make the community where they live wireless. It didn't go through, all the politics and everything. So here are these students, they all have laptop computers, but then when they go home, they have no networking ability because the community is not wireless. So it was, they were constantly, you know, butting their heads up. What did I do? I'll just go back. So when I did ask them, most of them said they liked working together, but then if they needed it, they wanted to have one-on-one support. So it wasn't that they eliminated the individualized education. And then this is the thing that I thought really stuck out to me, and that was, we would like to be trained to have a trade. So this school, when it was back in its heyday, had all kinds of different types of opportunities to pursue other types of, you know, they had an auto mechanic shop, they had all kinds of different opportunities. All of that was wiped out so that they could come in and do all of this restructuring and nothing about crafts or trade. So, anyway, so this whole idea of what they wanted to be able to learn and be able to do was not any longer available to them. And so when I said that, well, they said, well, we used to be a PBL school, but we're not anymore. And I said, well, what is it that you like? But boy, I'll tell you, this was in the leadership group and the students themselves. You know, the teacher guides you if you go the wrong direction, not lecture, teaches you how to work with people, get you ready for life, et cetera, et cetera. So these are some of the things that they actually said that they felt they learned. Independent living and survival skills, non-academic skills. That was really a big thing. Like, if you notice, there's a lot of things here that don't necessarily have to do with content and non-academic. Self-determination, we want to learn how to be able to present ourselves, how to handle ourselves in a tough situation. All right, so that's 1995, 2010, and 2012. So now I want you to kind of see something, right? So now I'm going to a high school. In the founding principal, 2007, award-winning high school, been visited by President Obama, example of, you know, what we should be doing with students. And so the data, the majority of the data started out with just, what do you like about school? I didn't even have to get to, what do you not like about school? What if you could learn anything you wanted to learn, didn't really apply because they were learning what they wanted to learn through project-based learning. And it was, if the school happens to be at 100%. So I'm just going to kind of let you read a few things. Now, of course, I'm sure you can read some of it in context, but I really like the last quotation. They don't sugarcoat things. Like, if they don't like your project, they'll tell you something. I think that's more effective feedback from my students, so I know what to improve or in the future, what not to do with my future project. And then, you know, the collaboration in the second one, I'll notice things that he won't notice, et cetera, et cetera. Working together as a partner. Look at this. We're allowed to make our own choices about our work. the end of one project, we discuss ideas for new projects and ideas for things that we'd like to learn and ways we may want to learn it. They get us out of our comfort zone. They help us experience what the real world actually is like. This is really powerful because this district has a traditional high school, and so they can choose which schools. If you go to the school up the street, our normal high school, I thought that was interesting that they called it normal, you know? So, I mean, how many times in special ed do we hear the difference between special ed and normal? So they're referring to this school as a normal high school. It was, you know, normal worksheet, turn it in. I wanted to try something different, and this high school allowed me to do that. One of the questions that I asked one student by himself, and I said, what do you like about school? He said, I don't get bullied anymore. Because it's this teamwork orientation, and they're all responsible for making sure. And I mean, I was just like, oh my gosh, don't get bullied anymore. I thought that was so phenomenal. They let you kind of do your own thing within the project. Never feel constrained or controlled. It's not like you're in a box. And here's this person that talks about wanting to get out of the shell. I like the freedom they gave us, and I guess it's PBL when you get to collaborate with a lot of students. It's interesting, one of the students that I introduced, that I interviewed, senior, that had dyslexia and a learning disability, guess who introduced the President of the United States? And then when they interviewed him on TV, like, how did you feel? You know, what did your mom have to say? And he opened up, he said, well, I'm very dyslexic, but I work very well verbally. I mean, he just was very open, you know, and talking about it. And it was so cool. And actually, one of the other students, and this is what one of the student at Heritage High School, one of the students that I interviewed that has a learning disability was the student that was the student body president his senior year, because he single-handedly brought together this leadership group and went to the school board meetings and convinced the school not to turn their school over to a charter school. So, you know, we're saying, you know, just because these are the types of non-academic skills that we don't necessarily consider. So Yanzio, who's one of my favorite people, who's, you know, he wrote, I'm trying to think of what the book is that he wrote. I don't know the title, but he talked about how, you know, China and how they're working on their schools, and actually is saying that the United States is kind of going in the same direction. But he actually talks about in a book that he has a chapter on 21st century skills and learning, that the ingredients to a world-class education is to make sure that we look through strengths-based perspective, allow everyone to become autonomous, and enable them to have skills to be responsible for their own learning. So my argument is that we need to make 21st century skills, bring that to the top of the list, and figure out ways to be able to learn academics that's going to actually help them perform those skills as well. And so I'm ending my statement, and this is Burrell, who says students of all ages and abilities, including those with special needs, when he's talking about 21st century skills. So a lot of this information came out of different books that have been devoted to 21st century skills. When I've looked through entire books though, and I cannot find them talking about, I mean, these are like the few quotes that I found about students in special ed. But what I am saying is, you know, it's just really funny, because way back, and I'm sure it would have been before that, but this is what I think the students would have said. Why don't you ask us? We could have told you this a long time ago. So here we are, you know, 1983, we're in 2016, and a nation at risk, and all of these things. They've been saying this all along. So just thought maybe there might be some food for thought. People might have some thoughts of their own.
A question for you, Barbara. Define what you mean by problem-based learning.
Okay.
When you use that a lot.
Well, project-based learning is different than problem-based.
Right. So
Okay.
So what is problem-based learning?
It's more of the idea where they actually have to draw from a specific situation or event or problem that exists, and then try and do research on that specific problem.
Then how does that differ from project-based learning?
Well, I use problem and project because that was what was actually in his book. But project-based learning is actually a model where they have a driving question and they have to solve that particular. Starts with a specific driving question, and then they have to investigate and look at. So I really will have to be honest with you. I'm not as familiar with problem-based learning. Do you have something that you
No,
can
I
add?
don't know what, that's why I asked.
Yeah, okay. But problem-based learning comes more from the context of actually identifying a problem. So the problem is not provided to the student, it's something that they have to actually pose. Right, yeah, yes.
Barbara, could you, I don't want to jeopardize any kind of anonymity that you want to present in research, but I think it would be helpful maybe to get a sense of the second high school. And, I'm guessing that when you're making reference to the high school, you're making reference to a high school that has adopted a whole school model that has particular characteristics of a certain kind. I don't know if you wanted to go down that path or not, because I'm assuming you're making reference to New Tech Network.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the second high school actually was developed it was a middle school. The building was a middle school, and the school district was judged as ineffective. And so the superintendent said, we've got to do something to turn this around. So they actually decided to completely gut the middle school and turn it into this separate high school. And so the founding principal that came in, they actually adopted this whole New Tech high school model. They worked with the Buck Institute of Learning, and it's 100% project-based. Is that what you're talking about? And what they actually do is the students, they have a lottery. So, I mean, but the lottery is male-female. So they draw a male's name, a female's name, a male's name, a female's name. What's interesting is that some of these students didn't start out wanting to go to this school. Their parents said, we want you to go to this school. And so they were like, I don't want to go here. I want to be with my friends. I don't want to. And some students occasionally did not necessarily decided, this isn't the school for me. But many of these students that actually started there said that they would get together with their friends on the weekend and find out what they were learning about, and said, oh my gosh, we're doing really cool stuff, and you guys are doing worksheets and that kind of thing. But it was founded specifically on the project-based New Tech Network. It's actually a school within the New Tech Network. And what's kind of sad, well, go ahead, I want to answer your question.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, well, what is kind of sad that I talked to the principal, he retired this past year. And he said that the school board members that are at this school district are all new school board members. And they're not necessarily sensitive to what is going on. And he said that it's really sad what's happening, and that some of the teachers are all trying to figure out if they can find positions somewhere else.
I don't want to interrupt, but
Can
I ask one more follow-up?
Yeah.
And so how has the New Tech Network model at this particular setting been a magnet for identified students who wanted to get in? Do you have any sense of that? As a draw.
Yeah, some of the students have actually well, first of all, they have they have 100% graduation rate, and many of these students go on to college. And so what's happening is the students are beginning to realize that even though this is tough, maybe this would be in my best interest to go to this particular school. So there are more and more students until this year actually that are trying to go there. They're trying to initiate the project-based learning model at the traditional high school, but
It's a cultural piece.
It's really it's a hard, because one of the things that they talk to me about a lot is the school culture. So the incoming class, they have a school culture poster that they have. And for example, on Mondays, I'm sorry, I'm going to get to your question, but on Mondays, they have the entire school meets together in the gymnasium. And then they were telling me if a student gets suspended or whatever, they actually have to, the school decides what the punishment is going to be. So the student comes in and has to be able to be willing, and they have to agree, we're gonna agree to this school culture. They have to come in and actually meet and talk, and then the students will ask the person questions, and then they'll determine what the punishment is. And so the principal told me they have this drop everything and read program, and he said he was trying to finish up his emails in his office, and somebody evidently came in and it got around that he wasn't reading. And so he had to go in front of the school, and they all decided that so what he had to do was actually go out, and whenever it was drop everything and read, he would put a chair out in the hallway so everybody could see that he was reading, and people were actually walking around. He said, yeah, but if I'm gonna expect my students to be able to do it, I have to do it too. Yes?
Well, it sounds like you really knew your individuals that you interviewed for that first round. Have you been able to keep up with any of them since then? Like, are they now in college, or are they out in the world, or?
Some of them have gone into the military. Some of them have gone on to the community college, and some have gone on to college. Some of them, their family in the one school was rural and suburban, so they've actually decided they're going to learn what their father does or whatever. But most of the students that have applied to colleges or whatever have been able to be successful, or community college or something. It's just they're so used to doing presentations. I mean, they do 30 to 40 presentations, and I don't know how many it is, and that was what was interesting. It's like, Miss, can you come to this presentation? We're talking about this type of thing. So it was just, especially the juniors and the seniors. Some of the freshmen and the sophomore are like, we're really struggling, but we're going to stick it out type of thing. So.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
This is wonderful. I'm curious about whether this problem-based and project-based learning is a reinvent the wheel kind of thing, or whether it has been conceived with a sense of its roots in John and Evelyn Dewey's Schools for Tomorrow, and William Kirkpatrick and Ellsworth Collins.
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you read some, I'm going to start in, Jim, I'm going to try and see if I can find something on problem-based learning. I have an article that I haven't read yet, so I'll send it to you so you have
It would
it
be
too.
great to document all of this too.
Yeah, because it sounds just like
These
do
are
it.
short-lived projects. They need to be.
Yeah, and I actually found a book, was able to download a book that actually talks about Dewey, starts out by talking about Dewey.
And the Foxfire thing, it's
Yes.
So I was going to say on project and problem-based learning, Shinta, who's not here, that's her area of expertise. And so, like when we look at the research, and there's also some people in ed tech who are doing a lot with that. But I mean, I think that for a real long discussion of that, I think you want to buy coffee, maybe lunch. Shin, our department chair, could talk your ear off on the differences, and a lot of times they aren't differentiated.
I think people refer to it back and forth, and so that's why I wanted to honor the author, because he had said problem-based, but I do know there's a deal.
What about curiosity-based learning? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of what you're asking for.
Yeah, you sometimes will see inquiry from science that's situated mostly in science on the same list of problem-centered learning for mathematics, and now the social justice problem-based stuff. It all has a lot of overlaps. The project-based to me always seems to imply there's maybe a little bit more of a guidance.
There is, yeah, like they have the driving question, and then they have the short teach, and actually the principal of this school has actually started his business, started bringing in, would bring people in, and they would actually learn how to do project-based learning for like a 2 or 3 day workshop. And he actually had his teachers, because they were co-teaching together and it was a cross-disciplinary approach. So a teacher could actually come in and do some training. And so that's now what he's going to do, is do consulting and training. He's going to be traveling all over the place to do this. But I don't know what's going to happen in school. I'm really kind of saddened by that. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I was just going to share. I visited a new tech school in Indiana a few years ago, doing some stuff with UDL, and the example for a problem-based learning, where I think what they had was the local community was relocating and building a a new center for pet adoption and whatever the other thing. And they brought the students together and said, all right, we've got to help them out. What do they need to do? Well, they're going to need to have a brochure. They need to have a budget. They're going to need to do publicity and other things. And then in the context of math, science, and literature, all the activities anchored on solving that problem. How do we make this new pet sanctuary in our community successful? What are all the things that you can consider? So it was a pretty cool model.
It's almost like the New Tech Network uses tech as a subtext. Of
Yeah,
real
and then,
issues.
yes, and then there was tech in there. So it's less the tech,
Yes.
more the issues.
Yes.
I had something I was thinking about while you were talking about that, and I can't remember. I do know that I'm kind of excited to see how the arts is going to actually move into this piece also. So, and that would kind of fill a void that I have.
What about animals?
Huh?
What about animals? You know, like buttercreams, kids training.
Oh,
rescue
okay.
animals and so forth.
So I don't know what's gonna happen to this school. I do plan on continuing to follow it. What's interesting is that the other school was actually gonna be turned over to a charter school organization, and the students themselves actually helped to elect new board members. And so I told Bill I was really excited at the beginning of this school year, the commissioner of the Texas Education Code, letting you know what state it's in, but actually announced that the school was no longer, they had met the benchmarks and was no longer in danger of being closed. So now the students can relax and so there's a happy ending in there. Thank you so much. Yeah, did you have something you wanted to
Is your opening quote from Quincy House?
Hmm?
The opening quote, your dissertation, is that Quincy House?
No, it's somebody
Another
Howell the third, Harold Howell.
Oh,
He's a
okay.
demographer, I think. Yeah. So if, I don't know whether anybody, if you want me to send the PowerPoint to you, then, okay, all right. My email is bpazey, bpazey, @austin.utexas.edu. So if you email me and then I'll just. All right.